Hello and welcome to Rock Paper Shotgun. My name is Colin Mahern and today we're answering that age-old question. What's black and white and red all over? No, it's not a newspaper, it's Otherside, a strange tactics game from the French/Swedish studio Lightbulb Crew. This one is out today and we've not seen loads of it in action, which always makes us a little bit nervous, but luckily Matthew has been playing it and is on hand to tell us what to expect and offer some Otherside review thoughts.
So, Colin, Otherside is a turn-based tactics game that you can probably see, with rogue-lite elements, which you probably can't see. The turn-based bit involves a gang of pasty sisters on a grid, managing action points, and there's a big focus on turn order, which I'll get to in a second. While the roguelite element is that the game has permadeath, which resets the whole campaign and does it quite often. It's the one setting the game has, so it's not just like activating Iron Man, it's kind of built into the campaign. And there are also a lot of randomised elements for you to deal with in each run, so it's quite an intriguing soup of ideas.
Okay, before we get into any of that, I do have to ask. These are all sisters, yes?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the game about this mystical mother figure birthing endless warrior daughters who wage an eternal war against the forces of suffering. Now, I'm actually going to put my hand up and say I don't really understand a lot of this story. In fact, most of what I know about it is what I grasped from the trailers that I watched before playing it. It's incredibly obtuse. One of the things the game doesn't do well is give you a firm footing in just what the hell is going on. So it's very much about kind of unpicking all the weird terminology and imagery and trying to piece it together. So if you like your stories to be spelled out, this ain't for you, I'll say that up front. But yes, you are birthing daughters and throwing them into battle. An incredibly cynical way to treat your children. It actually reminds me of some of those sort of notorious bad dads of pop music. You know, the patriarchs who kind of came up with the Jackson 5 and the Beach Boys and then forced all their poor children to dance forever. Only here, they're not singing and dancing, they're obviously fighting meat monsters, which is much worse. You also have to sacrifice daughters to heal other daughters, which I don't think ever happened in the Beach Boys.
No.
As far as I'm aware.
No.
I don't think they ever killed one Beach Boy to make another Beach Boy stronger.
But wouldn't it be nice if we were older and not being sacrificed to the blood god?
Well, quite.
Okay, so you mentioned combat does something interesting with turn order.
The whole thing is about controlling the timeline on the bottom of the screen. You know, on a basic level, every sister has 100 action points during their move.
Whoa.
And if you use more than 50 of those points, they become exhausted, and then their next turn is right at the end of the timeline. So you're trying to decide whether to go all in and delay your next turn, or take a small move now and get to do something sooner, if that makes sense. But on top of that, you then have moves that take a certain amount of time to trigger. So you have to get the right window of opportunity for those. So, you know, is the monster going to move before the move happens? Can you maybe use another daughter to delay that monster so that they're stuck in place so your move will connect? And so for that to happen, you have moves that delay or speed up turn order so that you can shuffle friends and foes to kind of get a turn order that works better for you. And it's quite an interesting twist, as it stops fights being purely about space, as they are in XCOM, Gears Tactics, etc. And it's entirely about time. You know, and I know that we both played XCOM Chimera Squad, and that dabbled with a similar thing.
Yeah.
But here, the skills are a lot more tailored to controlling the timeline, and the timeline can move about a lot more. So really, that is the kind of battleground, is the battle for the turn order, which in turn means you have to find lots of new tricks. You can't bring the kind of basics that you have from XCOM and Gears Tactics here. You know, it's not just about smart overwatch and good positioning. It does require you to develop a new style of play.
A bitter victory.
So that all makes sense, but where does the roguelite stuff kick in?
I know roguelite is one of those sort of irritating buzzwords that's been used so much as shorthand it almost becomes meaningless, but I do think it fits here. Fundamentally, it definitely feels like you're doing runs in the game rather than settling in for a campaign. It's designed to be overwhelming, your health pool doesn't regenerate, so you're constantly working towards death. There are reaction moves which are really powerful, but they use your health to trigger, so just by relying on those, which you do need to, certainly in the boss fights, is going to naturally drain your health and kind of push you closer to that game over. You can sacrifice daughters to get health back, but they have to be of equal level, which means training up a sister just to execute them, which feels like XP that should probably be going into the pocket of a character that you want to kind of take through the whole run. So there's a lot of stuff which is naturally eating away at your side, and then there are a few randomized events that trigger big buffs or debuffs, and they can have a dramatic effect if they happen at the right time. So like if you get one which halves all enemy health, you want to quickly hop into a boss fight to take advantage of that. I'll be honest that I found the kind of constant hammering of my team combined with the general obtuse story and the monochrome looks, which look really nice in screenshots and in footage, but do get a little bit boring quite quickly. It all sort of blurs into one. The enemy designs are quite samey, I found, and it just adds up to be like it's not a particularly enjoyable welcome to this world. There's not a lot you can kind of really cling on to kind of draw you in.
Before we were recording, you were saying the bosses were a particular nightmare.
Yeah, the bosses are huge difficulty spikes. They got massive health bars, lots of instant kill techniques, and they tend to have gimmicks that you have to learn by chipping away at them several times, and that in itself is not a huge problem. The idea of learning on each run is kind of part of the roguelite deal.
Of course.
But they are so much harder than the normal battles that come between that everything else feels quite boring. It feels like you're just doing the other missions to level up the daughters so that they can take on the boss fights. Everything is focused on those fights. Everything in between is a bit of a mush. The fact that there are only 3 classes and there are only a couple of skill tree options, the daughters don't end up feeling that different. You're fighting the same enemy combinations. I think for me, there just aren't enough variables to make one run feel different from the next.
So if you're butting heads with this, where does the breakthrough come?
So as you play, you're unlocking remembrances, which are beneficial powers you can activate at the start of a new run. Things like resurrecting sisters from a past run, jumping ahead in the story, having more health, stuff that generally makes it easier. But the biggies are definitely being able to resurrect daughters. You start off, once you've beaten the first boss, you can resurrect 1 daughter on each run. When you get to the second boss, you can resurrect 2 daughters, and obviously that means you can carry on grinding them up. It means they're going to get ahead of the power curve a lot more quickly than the daughters that are sort of starting afresh. Does mean that you end up with a couple of hugely overpowered characters who are basically dragging the new daughters through the ranks, and you do need those high-level heroes to tackle the bosses, so that makes the missions in between even easier. I think it also undermines character development a bit, because every daughter fits into one of 3 classes: sword, shield, guns, but they can evolve stats by behaviour in game. That isn't clearly explained. It feels quite organic, you'll get to the end of the thing and you'll see that you've now got 10 extra action points, say.
Okay.
And the idea is that you'll end up with quite a variety of heroes because of these sort of random stat changes, but because the focus is on resurrecting a couple of proven brutes, it means you don't really see much of that system. It feels like you're coming back to the same couple of characters every single time and maybe dragging a new character with you, and that does lessen over time because you can resurrect more sisters. There are missions where you can bring more than 3 in so that you can end up there are rewards for having a bigger pool. It does encourage you to have more characters as it goes on, but the main focus on these super powerful characters does feel like subsequent runs are sort of narrowing in as opposed to kind of branching out, which is something I associate with roguelites.
Now that wasn't nice.
So it sounds like it's asking you to do a lot of the same stuff whilst looking at very similar character models, very similar worlds, and there's just not enough variety.
Yeah, I'd say there's enough variety to get you through the game once, which I'm still doing. I haven't quite finished it myself. But I don't really see where the replay value in this is going to come from. Like, I don't think you'll be booting up an entire new campaign and having a significantly different time. You know, it's not a Dead Cells or a Binding of Isaac where there's just a wealth of fun stuff to discover on each and every run. You're being pulled through by the sense of what if. I would say it is a bit of a budget title, like it's £25 at launch. That's still more expensive than a lot of these other roguelites, which you'll get, you know, potentially thousands of hours from. And I definitely had more fun and got a lot more replayability out of things like XCOM Chimera Squad or Gears Tactics earlier in the year. You know, this is a game with a lot of smart ideas, you know, quite a striking look. It's certainly very unusual, but I just found it very, very hard to love, and it didn't quite get its claws into me.
Smart but hard to love. Sounds a lot like this channel.
Indeed.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for talking us through Otherside.
No worries.
And thank you, dear viewer, for joining us for another rambling review chat. If you have any questions about Otherside, why not pop them in the comments and Matthew will be able to answer them. If you found this video useful in any way, please do give it a like and subscribe to Rock Paper Shotgun for more like it. In fact, if you want to hear more about other tactical picks mentioned in this video, they're popping up on screen right now. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll hopefully see you again soon. Bye now.
Bye.
And goodbye from the sheep.